Hi everyone, welcome to my January reading wrap up. I read 15 books this month, so this was an interesting reading month because I read some of the best books I ever have in my life, but I've also read some books that I definitely did not enjoy that are very popular. So I'm really excited to dive in and review these 15 books with you. For those of you new here, I'm Liz, and I kind of rediscovered my love for reading this fall, and so I feel like I'm still kind of in the honeymoon phase, and that's why I'm reading 15 books in 1 month, which is crazy. That used to be like what I do a year, which is great. That's more than most people I know. So I started the year with 3 books that I was more than 50% of the way through. So I actually counted that as part of the 2023 wrap up. So some of them I'm just going to briefly touch base on that I did complete officially this month. One of these being The Body Keeps the Score, Brain, Mind, and Body in the Healing of Trauma. I've raved about this. This is a book I think literally every single person should read because most people have some sort of trauma, and if they don't, you definitely know someone who has had trauma. This man has spent his entire career studying and working with people on healing their trauma, and I really marked it up. I usually don't buy the physical copies because I am a nomad. For those that most of you probably don't know, I'm a nomadic, and so I spend part of my year abroad and I spend part of the year in my camper van, which is what I'm in right now, and that's why you're kind of in this corner because the camper van is a mess right now. And so anyways, I can't have a bunch of physical books, but this one was so good that when I started it in audio form, I was like, no, I have to have it and mark it up because it's amazing. So I highly recommend this. I also finished I was in the middle of one of the Shatter Me series, so let's just kind of touch base on that. So I read 3 of the Shatter Me series this month. Sorry, I have my notes here that I'm going to be looking down at occasionally. Unravel Me, Fracture Me, and Ignite Me. I gave a 4-star to Unravel Me, a 3.75 to Fracture Me, and a 4.5 to Ignite Me. Overall, my impression of the series, kind of mixed. I really didn't enjoy the first couple of books from the series, but it definitely got better, obviously, with Ignite Me at being a 4.5. So my advice is if you're going to start the series to just kind of push through till the Ignite Me. For some reason, I still feel like I didn't fully connect as much with the story and that I don't really feel the need to finish it. I might eventually, but I wasn't drawn to it right away, so I did not finish the series. I might pick it up again though. Let me know what you guys think of the next books and maybe that'll make my decision. Then I finished another book that I had started in 2023, and that was Miles from Nowhere. And that's a book about a married couple that traveled for 2 years around the world on bike. I highly recommend this. I gave this very high stars. It's kind of hard when it's like a memoir type book, so I'm not really going to officially give it a rating, but to me this was very, very good. Next, I read 2 of Ali Hazelwood's books back to back. I read The Love Hypothesis and Love Theoretically. The Love Hypothesis I enjoyed more. This is a story about a woman who is in grad school and she's working in health research. It's kind of like a fake dating trope with a professor. And I don't know, it's definitely cringy at points, but I thought it was overall really cute. I actually liked the health setting. I used to work in health research, and so I related a lot to kind of some of the stereotypes depicted in there. Overall, and I noticed this in both of her books, she emphasizes strongly like the differences in their sizes, like how big the men are in both of these books, and I found that to be quite cringy. But overall, I did enjoy The Love Hypothesis. I gave it a 4.25. Love Theoretically, I did not enjoy as much. I thought the dialogue was much more cringy. Also, the storyline I didn't find as interesting. It follows a woman who's trying to get a tenure track, so a good portion of the book is her trying to do this job interview, and I don't know. I didn't really like it. I thought it was kind of stressful. I think it was interesting that what she was trying to do is trying to show someone who struggles with like people pleasing, but I don't feel like it was executed really well. Overall, it wasn't my favorite. I gave it a 2.75. All right, next I read an awesome book. I read Finding Me. This is Viola Davis's memoir. I had no idea who Viola Davis was before I read this. I really enjoyed hearing her story growing up as a poor Black woman in Rhode Island and being a minority and just the experiences she had to go through, which were quite horrific. The racism and stereotypes she had to deal with dealing with our really whitewashed movie industry. I thought that was really interesting. So I'm not going to give this a rating as well, but I really did enjoy this. I guess just a couple of caveats. She does talk quite a bit about her religion, so if that's something you aren't going to be comfortable with, she does talk about her kind of spiritual beliefs a bit in it. And there was a lot of focus on her like specific movie role she did. And as someone who's like hasn't watched most of those things and just was really there for her overall story and experience. I found that part to be a little bit boring, but overall I thought it was really good and highly recommend that. Next I read Powerless, and this was interesting. So I was actually trying to look up what genre it was before I filmed this because I actually don't know. But they say it's like fantasy, magical realism. I don't know. It's hard to describe. So you're following a man who lives in a different world. And this world is very beautifully described in the book. And there's only one other person in existence in this world that he meets with once a week. And soon you discover throughout the book that maybe things aren't quite as he seems, and so there's kind of like a mystery element. I thought it was really well written. You can tell that the author is a very talented writer. She's very descriptive. I gave this a 4.35, which I know is like probably annoying. I probably should just round that up to 4.5. I think I'll just round that up to 4.5. I would have personally preferred a bit more detail and like it flushed out a little bit more. And so that's why I gave it a docked down a little bit. Because I would have preferred just kind of, you're left with just some questions. And I don't always love that in books. All right, next I read a book that I was so heavily influenced by TikTok to read this. People literally were like, this is the best book they've ever read. And they were talking so passionately about it that I'm just like immediately I'm like, okay, I need to find this. It's fan fiction. I've never read fan fiction before in my life. It's like a Harry Potter fan fiction. The author doesn't have the rights to like publish this, right? So you can get this for free. I downloaded the audiobook free on Spotify. It is 27 hours. So just bear that in mind, 27-hour audiobook. I actually listened to this with my husband because he was interested too, because the premise is Harry Potter is dead. And like, if just a few things had changed, what could have turned out to be like if he had died instead. I didn't really understand the whole like Hermione aspect of it before I downloaded it. I guess this is like a genre that people are really into, this Harry Potter, the Draco Malfoy and Hermione romance fan fiction. Anyways, I'm a huge fan of Harry Potter, so I was a little concerned reading this because I heard that if you're a huge fan of Harry Potter, you might not love it, and I could see that. However, at first I was really engaged with it. Like me and Alex, my husband, we were binging it. Like we were really going through it quickly. It was kind of intriguing, very disturbing at points. There's definitely some trigger warnings, so I would look at that up if that's a concern. But it was just so like disturbingly intriguing, and I thought it was really well written. But then you get like, I think it's about halfway, maybe a little more than halfway, and it just becomes so incredibly repetitive that like you're revisiting the same stuff just over and over and over again, that I literally wanted to bang my head against the wall. Like I was so frustrated with like, why are we still doing this? And it's a 27-hour audiobook. So this is a long time to be dedicating to this, and I was so frustrated. I almost was like, oh my goodness, I want to finish it, but I felt like it was leading up to a climax. I'm like, okay, I gotta just like push through. But then what the frustrating thing is that it never actually gets to the climax. It feels like it's building up to something, and then it never actually gets there. And then in like the epilogue, it mentions it casually, like what you thought would have been like a big climactic part of the book. And so to me, I was very frustrated because I felt like I wasted 27 hours of my life reading this book. And yes, there are some good aspects of it. Yes, I think it's actually very commendable that she could write this much. The author could write this much without like an editor and all those traditional processes. But to me personally, I felt like because of just the dragging and the lack of the climax when you spent so much time on it, I would say I just don't recommend it at all. That seems like it's a controversial opinion based on what I've seen online. I haven't seen anyone actually criticize this, but to me, I didn't love it. So I didn't actually give Manacled a rating. I didn't know how to rate it because it's so weird, because literally when I first read it, I was like, oh my goodness, this is going to be 5 stars. And then it just flopped. So I don't recommend it. So I think that's what just gonna be my rating is do not recommend. Okay, next up, I read another very popular book on booktube and book talk, and that is Powerless by Lauren Roberts. I was really excited about this because I really enjoy some of the romantic-y kind of a genre. Like I loved Fourth Wing, I loved the ACOTAR series, And so I thought I would really like this. I did not enjoy this. And mostly because I am a major fan, huge fan of the Hunger Games. Like, I feel like Hunger Games is one of the most beautifully written and just with so much meaning books out there, that whole series. I'm a massive fan. And so this felt like Lauren copy and pasted so many aspects of the Hunger Games that it was just too much. Like, I knew going into it that there were some similarities, and I wouldn't have minded some, but it was just she copied some parts that were just like unnecessary to even the plot line, that I just couldn't get past it. I really couldn't. And I kind of pushed through it even though I was feeling that way, and it did get better at the end. There were some more like original ideas towards the very end, and so it did boost it up for me. Before it was like a 2.5, and then I boosted it up to 3 after kind of getting to the ending. So it got a little bit better towards the end, but I really just had such a hard time getting past the Hunger Games. Like, it was just too similar. It would have been different. Like, I would have been fine if it was just a trials, like that would have been fine, but it's just copying specific details, like having her outfit means like is kind of being rebellious against the, you know, Capitol essentially, or their version of the Capitol. But it did like literally even serve no purpose. It just made it seem way too much of a copying. I felt like there were some issues with the writing. Like, I had to, for some reason, continually like look back and reread paragraphs because it was confusing. Like, it wasn't written super great. That's probably my controversial take on that book because everybody online seems to love it, but I didn't. But then my next book, one of the best books I have ever read in my entire life, The Night and Gale. I've never read anything from this author before, but now I want to read every single thing she has written because this was the most beautifully written book I think I've ever read. Like, it might be my favorite fiction book I've ever read in my entire life. So this is a historical fiction, and it is just beautiful. I read the first chapter, and I literally started to tear up, and I'm honestly maybe going to start doing it now because I literally just could not believe how beautiful the story was. And I knew it was going to be just beautiful, just reading the first chapter. And yeah, I'm starting to tear up just talking about it. Give me a moment. All right. Ooh, trying to calm down. Okay. So clearly, guys, it's powerfully written. If I can't even stop the tears from coming right now. It shows the point of view of two sisters, two very different sisters during World War II in German-occupied France. So for those who don't know, the Germans during World War II came into France and kind of took over France essentially during that time. It follows like the heroic things they end up doing during the war, and if you read that afterwards by the author, this was all inspired by real women who did amazing things during World War II, but their stories don't get mentioned in the history books, and so she really wanted to kind of honor that with this story. So while it is fiction, it's like kind of based off of real things that women did during World War II. It was so beautiful. Like, yeah, I'm gonna get teared up just talking about it. So definitely read it. It's absolutely amazing. I literally have no notes. Usually I always have a note on a book, but it was perfection. Okay, next I read another book that I really enjoyed. It's called One True Loves. So it's the story of a woman who was married to her husband for a year, and they'd been dating since they were in high school, and they traveled the world together and lived like a very adventurous life. And on one of his adventures he got into a plane accident and was believed to be dead. So 3.5 years later, after she's already dating somebody else and engaged to somebody else, one of her childhood best friends, she discovers that her husband is actually alive, and he was like surviving on an island for 3 years. I definitely have some criticism about that side of the story because it didn't seem super realistic. The fact that he could survive on this island for that long and not have horrendous PTSD. I mean, kind of briefly talked about it. I understand why the author didn't focus on it though, because it was supposed to be really about the woman who was left behind. But that was like my only kind of criticism. But the rest of it I thought was really good, and it's definitely much deeper than I thought it was just going to be about her trying to like choose between like her fiance and her husband. And that is a part of it, but it really is much deeper. It's really about like kind of change and how like you change over time, and really it's about her and not really about these two guys at all. And so I thought that was really interesting. I loved both the men a lot in this story, and so I personally was torn a lot of the time with who I thought she should choose. I thought it was actually really beautiful. I was surprised how much I enjoyed that. So I gave it a 4.5 stars. Next, I read a nonfiction called Crying in Hmart. It's a memoir about a woman who is half Caucasian and half from South Korea. Her mother's from South Korea. Her mother passes away in the book, so a lot of it follows that. And she kind of struggles with her identity as like a half Korean, half Caucasian person, and she wants to kind of maintain that Korean side after her mom passes. And there's definitely a lot of focus on her mom's death, which I don't think I was fully mentally prepared for. I really enjoyed the book, but for me personally, having just read I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy the month before, it was a lot kind of going through that again. And I think if I could do it over again, I would have waited a few months between those books because it was just kind of a lot at once to have to kind of experience again. Overall, though, I do recommend that book. I thought it was really good. Okay, and lastly, I read Rock, Paper, Scissors. This is a mystery thriller, and I heard it was good to read in the wintertime because the story takes place in a small, like, I always thought it was a cottage before I read it, but it's actually like a chapel in the Scottish Highlands during a blizzard. And I actually really liked this. Usually I have some mixed feelings about mystery thrillers. Sometimes I find them just a little too disturbing, but this one I actually really liked. I felt like it just had like the kind of spooky vibes that you kind of want in a book like this, and I thought it was really interesting. So this husband and wife, they're having serious marital problems. They win a trip to this remote place to stay that ends up being an abandoned church in the Scottish Highlands, and they're from the UK. So they drive up, and this is kind of like their last chance to get their marriage together is kind of their thought. And then spooky things start happening in this old church that has like a crypt, and it has like the perfect spooky vibes. And there's another person who has a small cottage on the property at the same time, and she clearly is getting into the church as well. I don't know. It's super spooky, and I really enjoyed this. I gave it a 4.25, so I really enjoyed that. That's everything I read. am kind of mostly through with some other books that I want to talk to you guys about, but I'll have to save it for next time. As you guys probably saw, very mixed reading month, but overall, a lot of good books here. Let me know if you guys feel differently. This is obviously all my personal opinions, and we all have different tastes in books, so I'd love to know what you guys think about these books. If you guys know of some books you think I might like based on the books I've read and rated, let me know. I'm always looking for more recommendations, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye.